The golden age of Disney sold us a dream, a smiling child star with a perfect life. But while the world fell in love with Hayley Mills, a silent heist was unfolding behind the scenes, stripping her of everything before she was old enough to even ask why. Yet, the stolen fortune was only the first blow. What followed, and how she lives today, is so unsettling it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. This is a story of how Hollywood's most precious icon ended up fighting a secret war in total silence. How does a global icon wake up one day to find all her hard-earned money legally stolen? To understand how the world's most famous teenager ended up with nothing, we need to go back to the moment everything changed. It was a day that should have been full of celebration. But instead, she found herself in a boardroom where her dreams, her work, and her fortune were quietly slipping away. The 21-year illusion for most people, turning 21 feels like a door finally opening. It's the huge milestone where childhood ends and your real life begins. Usually, it comes with music, laughter, and a few raised glasses. But for Hayley Mills, that day didn't feel like a beginning. In fact, it felt more like an ending. Her 21st birthday wasn't a celebration. It was a day she realized that despite 10 years of exhausting work, she had nothing to show for it. If you grew up in the 1960s, or if you love classic films, Hayley Mills needs no introduction. She was one of the most famous child stars in the world. As Disney's golden girl, she carried entire movies on her shoulders. Movies like Pollyanna and The Parent Trap turned her into a household name. To the world, she represented innocence, joy, and success. But on the day she officially became an adult, there was no cake, no champagne, and no smiling crowd. Instead, there was a silent office in London and a conversation that would change how she saw her entire life. Imagine sitting in a plush leather chair, staring at a polished desk, waiting to finally become a millionaire. That's exactly where Hayley was. She was waiting for the paperwork that was supposed to hand over the keys to her future. Since she was 12 years old, she had been working like a grown-up. While other kids were playing the park, Hayley was under hot studio lights, memorizing lines and working 14-hour days. Behind the scenes, everyone knew she was rich. The rumors were everywhere. People speculated that her trust fund was worth what would today equal around $17 million. Yeah, you heard right. That's enough money to ensure you never have to worry about a bill for the rest of your life. But something felt wrong the moment her lawyer walked into the room. He wasn't smiling. He didn't offer a happy birthday or a congratulatory handshake. Instead, he silently pushed the document across the desk and told her she might want to sit back before he started talking. In that moment, the fantasy didn't just fade. It cracked. Her money was gone. And it wasn't just a little bit short. It was simply gone. But how does a girl who never spent a dime of her own money end up with nothing? At first, it made no sense. We've all heard about child stars losing their fortunes because their parents bought mansions or they blew it all on wild parties. But for Hayley, none of that was true. Her money hadn't been lost in a bad investment or spent on luxury. For years, Hayley believed that all her hard work would eventually pay off and that her millions were safe in a bank. She didn't realize that while she was working nonstop, the adults she trusted were letting her entire fortune slip away. Now, to understand how Hayley ended up with nothing, we need to look at the people she trusted most. Her dad, Sir John Mills, was a famous actor, but he didn't know much about money. He and his advisors tried to protect her Disney paychecks by putting them into a special company. They thought it would save her money on taxes. But the government didn't see it that way. They said the company wasn't real. It was just a way to hide her earnings. While Hayley was busy filming movies, a team of high-powered government lawyers was building a case to dismantle her savings. They used a post-war tax law that allowed them to tax the super-rich at a staggering 91%. This meant that for every dollar she earned as a child, she was allowed to keep just 9 cents. The rest was gone before she ever had a chance to touch it. The legal battle wasn't easy. It lasted for years. The case moved through one court after another. Before long, a judge named Lord Denning surprised everyone by siding with Hayley. He called the government's attempt to take her money unfair and almost cruel. For the first time in years, Hayley could imagine keeping her fortune. But the government appealed. They took the case to the House of Lords, the highest court in England. In the end, The final ruling didn't go as expected. The Lords decided the government had every right to her money. No one could stop it. Hayley's fortune, nearly £2 million, which would be worth tens of millions today, was gone. It was taken before she even had a chance to touch it. After giving her entire childhood to movies, Hayley had nothing to show for it. The years of hard work, the long hours under hot studio lights, and the dreams of a young girl all disappeared in one legal decision. It was a breaking moment. The shock was so deep that Hayley later revealed she felt the blood literally drain from her face. She was 21 years old. Her name was known in every house across the globe, and she had just found out she had spent her entire childhood working for a government that had already spent her paycheck. This wasn't just a financial disaster. It was a total betrayal. For years, she had sold a dream to millions of fans. The idea that if you were good, worked hard, and stayed innocent, life would reward you. Yet, here she was, the girl who had everything, realizing she was effectively broke. What made it worse was that nothing changed on the outside. To the world, she was still the cheerful, bouncy blonde girl who could solve any problem with a smile. Magazine covers didn't mention her empty bank accounts, and fans had no idea she was secretly wondering how she would pay her bills as an adult. This created a painful double life. On camera, she had to keep being the world's sweetheart. But behind closed doors, Hayley was struggling to figure out how to survive. It leaves you wondering, if Hayley was the most valuable asset in the Disney empire, where were the people who were supposed to be looking out for her? How could a girl earning millions of dollars end up with a practically empty bank account? To really understand why Hayley didn't even suspect a financial storm waiting for her, we have to step into the world she grew up in. Her story didn't begin on her 21st birthday. It started long before that. The girl in the golden cage long before the government touched Hayley's wealth. Something even more important had already slipped away. That was her identity. Inside Hollywood, people would later describe the life she lived as a golden cage because, from the outside, it looked like a dream come true. But inside this world, the rules were incredibly strict. Every smile she gave was practiced, and every one of her public moves had to be approved by the people in charge. By the time she turned 21, Hayley had been managed for so long that simply standing on her own 2 feet felt unfamiliar. And to understand how she ended up there, you have to go back to the beginning. Hayley Mills, born on the 18th of April, 1946, did not stumble into fame by accident. In fact, she grew up surrounded by the art of storytelling since her father, Sir John Mills, was a well-known British actor. This meant that movie sets were part of her everyday life, and cameras and scripts felt normal to her before she was even a teenager. Then at just 12 years old, she landed a breakthrough role in a film called Tiger Bay. Her performance was so natural that it caught the attention of the most powerful man in entertainment at the time, Walt Disney. Walt was not just looking for another young actress. He was looking for something special. He signed Hayley to a major contract and cast her in Pollyanna, which was a gamble that paid off almost instantly. The movie turned her into a global star, and she even received a Special Academy Award for her performance. To the public, the partnership looked warm and magical because Walt spoke about her proudly. He even sent her notes and gifts while calling her his greatest discovery. It all sounded like a fairy tale. But when you look closer, that same closeness would eventually become the source of Harley's biggest struggles. Walt Disney had a very clear idea of who Hayley should be, and he did not want her experimenting or drifting into grown-up roles too quickly. He wanted her frozen in time as someone sweet and innocent. This image sold tickets, so protecting it became his top priority. Once she signed that contract, Hayley was not just an actress anymore. She was a carefully managed brand. And here's the thing. In Hollywood of the 1960s, brands were not allowed to change unless the studio approved it first. So, imagine being 16 years old and realizing the most powerful man in your industry expected you to stay a child forever. That was Harley's reality at the time. While the rest of the world was moving into an era of rebellion and change, she was being told to remain the same. It didn't end there. Walt went as far as to guard her wholesome image fiercely by turning down serious roles that might make audiences see her differently. He blocked opportunities that could have allowed her to grow as an artist because he wanted her to stay in the safe, profitable Disney lane. Now, for a teenager, This kind of control created a very lonely life. Hayley spent her days working long hours with adults twice her age, and when filming ended, she did not have a normal group of classmates waiting for her. Instead, the people around her were employees, handlers, and studio staff. She was famous enough to be recognized anywhere, yet she could not even attend a simple school dance without it becoming a national headline. The studios guided every detail, from what she wore to what she said in interviews and how she posed for photos. Wanting to be a professional, she followed all the rules and smiled whenever she was told to. But underneath the surface, she was starting to lose herself behind that manufactured image. As she moved into her late teens, the pressure only became more intense. When your entire career depends on looking a certain way, every natural change feels dangerous. Her body was naturally changing, but she knew the magic of her career depended on her staying small and young. She began to look in the mirror with fear, worried that the simple act of growing up would make the world stop loving her. She was desperate to stay the girl on the poster, and this desperation was about to lead her down a very dark path. And as the pressure reached a breaking point, she crossed paths with someone who offered what sounded like an easy solution. It was a way to stay slim and a way to keep control. Unfortunately, it was the start of a habit that would nearly cost her everything. So, while the world was busy watching her movies, Hayley was secretly watching her weight in a way that would turn her life into a nightmare. The secret struggle behind the smile in the early 1960s. If you saw a picture of Hayley Mills, you saw the very definition of a happy, healthy teenager. She had rosy cheeks, bright eyes, and that unmistakable glow. She looked like she spent every day playing in the sun. But behind that picture-perfect image was a secret silently eating away at her. For decades, no one knew the truth. The media back then didn't report on mental health or personal struggles, and Hayley was a master at keeping up appearances. It wasn't until much later in her life, when she finally sat down to write her own story in her memoir, Forever Young, that she revealed the dark reality of her teenage years. She chose to speak out, so that others wouldn't feel as alone as she did. As Hayley moved into her late teens, she found herself trapped. The world wanted her to stay the little girl from the parent trap forever, but her body had other plans. Growing up was normal for everyone else, but in Hollywood, it could mean the end of a career. The pressure to stay slim was brutal, and for a child star like Hayley, it felt like a life-or-death mission. Every glance in the mirror became a test. She didn't see the girl everyone adored. She saw a stranger staring back. Unfortunately, back in the 1960s, there were no podcasts, no social media campaigns, and no conversations about body positivity. You were either perfect or you were done. There was no middle ground for a Disney princess who was starting to look like a woman. However, the breaking point came when she met a famous horse racing jockey who casually mentioned how jockeys kept their weight down. He told her that after a big meal, he would eat a handful of grass to make himself throw up. To most people, that would sound extreme. But to a terrified teenage girl, desperate to save her career, it sounded like a miracle. Now, Harley didn't actually eat grass, but she did take the lesson to heart. From that moment, a long, lonely battle with bulimia began. At the time, she didn't even know the disorder had a name. She actually thought she was being clever by finding a way to keep the studio happy and stay in the spotlight. It was a secret war that she fought alone every single night, often hiding in a hotel bathroom while the world believed she was living a fairy tale. Unfortunately, the physical toll was devastating. Her hair lost its shine, and her skin became a constant source of worry. She eventually required strong antibiotics just to keep her face camera-ready. Her body even stopped functioning normally, and it didn't end there. She stopped getting her period altogether. She had reached what she later called her skeletal weight, but the voice in her head and the silent pressure from the studio told her it was never enough. Despite the pain, she hit it all perfectly. On set, she was a total professional. She would shake hands and deliver her lines with a smile everyone loved. Her parents, her directors, and even Walt Disney only saw a hard-working girl. They didn't see the fear in her eyes over every bite of food, the panic in every mirror glance, or the guilt she felt for failing herself while keeping up the perfect image for everyone else. This was why the incident on her 21st birthday was heartbreaking. Of course, One would have thought that going through all this, sacrificing her health, her girlhood, and her peace of mind, would at least make her a millionaire. It felt like the fair trade for a childhood spent under hot lights and a body pushed to the brink. But as we know, when the paperwork was finally signed, the staggering reality hit. She had lost every penny to the government's monstrous tax rates. She had starved herself for a fortune that didn't exist. She had protected a brand that left her with nothing but a damaged body and an empty bank account. But this was the moment the world didn't see coming. Most people would have crumbled, but Hayley did something different. She didn't give up. Instead, she looked at the wreckage of her Golden Girl image and decided to shred the Disney princess brand entirely. If she were starting from zero, she was going to do it on her own terms. Harley was done playing the innocent child. She was ready to become a woman, even if it meant walking straight into a scandal. The scandalous escape when Hayley Mills finally left Disney. She knew as long as the world still saw her as that smiling little girl from the movies, she would never truly be free. So instead of playing it safe, she made a move that absolutely stunned Hollywood and her fans. She took a role in a movie called The Family Way. Now, this wasn't a fairy tale movie with a happy ending. It was a serious, messy story about real adult problems. There was no magic and no cheerful songs. It was Hayley's way of telling the world that she was done protecting the perfect image that made her famous. She didn't stop there. She also signed on for a dark thriller called Twisted Nerve. And just like that, the golden Disney glow was gone. She wasn't playing a nice girl anymore. She was stepping into scary, dangerous situations. Hollywood noticed, and so did her fans. Hayley was picking these parts on purpose. She was forcing everyone to see her as a woman, whether they were ready for it or not. But just when audiences thought her new roles were shocking, Hayley made a choice off-screen that sent the entire world into a frenzy. During the filming of The Family Way, Hayley fell in love with the director, Roy Bolting, and when the public found out, the reaction was instant outrage. Here's why. Hayley was only 20 years old at the time, and most fans still thought of her as a kid. Roy, on the other hand, was 53. He was also married to his third wife at the time and had children of his own. The age difference alone was enough to stun everyone. Back in the 60s, people saw this as a huge scandal. Newspapers that once praised her suddenly turned on her. They painted Roy as a bad man and Hayley as a girl who had been tricked. Roy later joked that people acted like he had kidnapped a Disney character. However, things at home were very different. For the first time, Hayley felt like she was treated as a real person, not just a movie star or a child. Roy listened to her, encouraged her to think for herself, and even helped her look into her money. That's when she realized the adults around her hadn't really protected her fortune at all. For the first time, she started feeling a sense of freedom she had never known. Despite all the controversies, they stayed together. They got married in 1971 and had a son, Crispian Mills. Roy also had 5 sons from previous marriages, so their home was always busy and full of life. But over the years, the pressure of the age difference and the constant public attention became too much. And unfortunately, by 1977, the marriage ended. After the divorce, Hayley moved into a modest flat in London. She was still famous, but now she had to figure out how to live on her own, take care of her son, and discover who she really was without cameras watching or the media telling her what to do. For the first time, she was in control of her life. This was the start of a new chapter, the moment Hayley Mills could finally live on her own terms. But life wasn't done testing her. In 2008, on her birthday of all days, Hayley Mills reportedly received a phone call that left her heartbroken. Doctors told her she had breast cancer. After everything she had already survived, the loss of her money, the pressure of fame, and the public judgment, this was no longer about image or reputation. This was about staying alive. She began chemotherapy, hoping it would be the answer, but the treatment hit her hard. It left her drained, frightened, and barely able to recognize herself. After only 3 sessions, she made a decision that stunned even her doctors. She quit. Instead of giving in to fear, Hayley chose to take control in the only way she knew how, working with her medical team. She rebuilt her life around careful eating, holistic wellness, and listening to her own body. Quietly, away from headlines and cameras, She fought the illness on her own terms. And for 3 years, almost no one knew what she was facing. Then, finally, she received the word she had been waiting for. She's cancer-free. The health struggle did something deeper than save her life. It changed the way she saw herself forever. Hollywood had spent decades teaching her that her body was a product, something to be shaped, watched, and judged under bright lights. Cancer stripped that belief away. It reminded her that her body did not belong to a producer or a brand or an audience. It belonged to her. When you step back and look at her life, a pattern starts to appear. She lost her fortune before she ever got the chance to enjoy it. She was torn apart in the press for who she loved. She faced a disease that could have ended everything. And yet, every single time, she refused to let those moments define her ending. The little girl locked inside that perfect Disney image was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned how to trust her own voice. Present life and legacy Hayley Mills is no longer living for the media. She is no longer chasing approval or trying to protect a fantasy that had once paid her bills. After a lifetime spent performing for the world, surviving for the industry, and smiling through pain, she finally reached the one thing fame had never given her before. She was living for herself. Today, Hayley is 79 years old. Whenever her name pops up in the news lately, the stories almost always focus on one thing: that lost fortune. The headlines make it sound like a total disaster, painting a picture of a Hollywood legend who ended up with nothing. We tend to love tragic endings, don't we? It's easy to imagine her sitting alone in a small room, looking at old photos and crying over the millions of dollars that slipped through her fingers. But if you actually see how Hayley lives today as she approaches her 80th birthday, the reality is a huge surprise. It's not the tragedy everyone expects. Hayley doesn't live in a massive mansion with a fleet of fast cars. She lives a quiet, normal life in London. To someone who only cares about a bank account, her life might look like a failure. After all, she should have been one of the wealthiest women in England. But when you hear her talk, you realize the sad part isn't that she lost her money. It's that the world thinks she needed it to be happy. In 2021, she released her memoir, Forever Young. In the book, she finally told the truth. She admitted that she does think about the money sometimes, usually when a bill comes in or when she realizes she has to keep working in her late 70s just to keep things running. But then she says something that changes everything. She doesn't actually miss it. To her, it's impossible to be heartbroken over something she never truly held in her hands. The fortune was always just a ghost. By the time she was old enough to use it, it was already gone. Strangely, losing everything was what saved her. If she had been worth millions at 21, she might have stayed stuck in that Disney bubble forever. She might have never taken risks or found out who she was away from the cameras. Today, Hayley's version of being rich looks very different. She has a legendary legacy, including a special Juvenile Academy Award, the last one ever given for Pollyanna. She's a grandmother to 5 kids. She spends her days with her family, just being a normal mom and grandma. When she takes an acting job now, like her recent roles in The Wheeler Dealers or the popular series Wild at Heart, she does it because she loves the work, not because she's a puppet for a studio. She survived an eating disorder, a government that took her paychecks, and an industry that tried to stop her from growing up. She is a living example that the moments where we think we've lost everything are often the moments that give us a fresh start. If she had kept the millions, she might have just been another lonely, rich person living in the past. Instead, she became a survivor. She is healthy, her mind is sharp, and she is at peace. She doesn't look back at the tax man with anger. She sees that day as the moment she was forced to find a real life. The story of Hayley Mills isn't a warning about losing wealth. It's a success story about finding your own path. While the news says she lost it all, Hayley feels like she finally gained her freedom. She outlived the people who tried to control her and the system that tried to own her. At 79, Hayley isn't someone to feel sorry for. She is a woman who realized that the most important thing you can own isn't a bank account. It's yourself. She lost her fortune, but she found a kind of happiness that a check for $17 million could never buy. And as this video comes to an end, it leaves us with one big question. If you were in her shoes, would you trade your freedom to have the millions back? Or is being truly yourself worth more in the end? Drop your thoughts in the comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.